Good morning, everybody. My name's Glyn Staines, and on behalf of RECOUP, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar. As you can see, we have a real snappy title, How Your Pack Gets Through the System. We did actually have a slightly longer one earlier on, which would have sent a number of people to sleep, so we thought we'd come up with something shorter and more precise. Today's webinar will be chaired by Dr. Adam Reed of Suez, together with speakers, two from RECOUP, Paul, East and Kate Bedford, and we're also very lucky to have Jo Padwick from Suntory, who will go through her experiences on particular case study. What I'd like to do is just, next slide please. I'd just like to go through what RECOUP's aims and objectives are, just so you know where we stand. We lead and inform on the development of plastics recycling. We believe we are an independent voice, and all of what we say is based on facts. We look to educate businesses and people, and the overriding objective of RECOUP is to preserve and protect the physical and natural environment, which I think is everybody recognises is what we need to do in relation to our products. Okay, next slide. This is the structure that RECOUP has in terms of how we achieve those goals, and we end up often presenting a lot of published data, which many of you or all of you can access and help develop your own strategy for dealing with these issues. Next slide, please. As you can see, we have a number of well-recognized names in all sectors of the packaging chain, and together with yourselves as consumers, I think we represent the whole of the value chain in this area. So I think that's enough about RECOUP and what we do. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to Dr. Adam Reed, who will chair today's webinar and hopefully be able to answer a lot of your questions. One of the things I would like to say with regard to today's webinar, it will be recorded and all the slides will be available at the end of the webinar. I would ask all the attendees to turn off the chat function and also turn off the raised hand function and submit any questions using the question and answer function. Any unanswered questions during the webinar session will actually be answered afterwards and sent round in a document at a later date to all attendees. So hopefully you'll all be able to follow that. You'll only see the speaker and the slides on the screen at any time, but please use the question and answer function for anything you wish to raise, as I say. Thank you very much, and over to you, Adam.
Oh, thanks very much, Glyn. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And my God, there's the picture of me wearing a tie. It's been a while, hasn't it? It's great to be here. It's an absolute honour to be asked by RECOUP to chair this session and to participate with a bit of commentary and banter as we go. I think, you know, as somebody that's been working in waste and resource management for over 25 years, and I should, you know, explain who I am as the External Affairs Director at Suez. I get to talk a lot of rubbish for a living, and increasingly I get to talk to lots of brands and manufacturers about their stuff and where does it go and why doesn't my system work. So today's topic is very, very pertinent. But I'm also the incoming president of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, and so I get to chair a lot of webinars and get to reflect on where is our sector going. And you know, we're expecting some really major consultations at the end of this week, early next week, in terms of extended producer responsibility, which is going to drive brands to rethink some of their packaging. We're going to have consistent collections, which is going to enable us to ensure that we collect the right stuff all the time from everybody, whether you be a business or a householder. So there's a lot of change coming in our sector. And I think change is opportunity, but change is risk, because if we don't manage the change correctly, we could end up with a bigger problem on our hands. And the problem in question for me is contamination. As somebody that has run a MRF and now has a number of MRFs within the portfolio, my biggest bugbear is quite simply the wrong material arriving in a mixed container of supposedly good quality recyclate from households and businesses, and then I'm expected to do miracles with it. Now, you as brands and as professionals within the system are assuming rightly that your material has been well designed. You know, it's got recycled content. It's designed with our system in mind, and therefore, why isn't it being recycled? And it's not being recycled because somewhere in that system it's being contaminated. It's being lost because of how it goes through the system. So today's conversation, I think, is very pertinent because I get asked two questions every day of the week. The first question is, Adam, why can't we collect that from my house or your house or my business? So consistent collection. And number two, if I was to change my packaging, Adam, will that get recycled more or less? And I think today is absolutely about that kind of analysis. It's very much about how do we ensure that whatever your material stream, and you know, RECOUP clearly plastics focused, but I could argue the same is true of cardboard, glass, aluminium and steel. They've all got their own properties and they all get sorted in different ways, and we'll hear from Paul about that later. But how do we ensure that we are making good design decisions and we have a system that is able to cope with not only the materials, but also the flow of those materials, the peaks and troughs in the arisings, the uncertainty of how those materials are handled in the household or in business, and more importantly, what is the relationship between those consumers and their bins, and what does that mean for a system that is predicated on a certain quality or designed for a certain composition? So there's lots of moving pieces, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. We've got some great speakers, so I'm going to speak less than the time allotted because I want to let them get to the floor. Questions, if I'm looking up there, it's because I'm scanning your questions. So the more you ask, the more I can share. If you don't ask, then I have to make up the questions, and then you can complain later if you don't like them. So that's probably enough from me, but I will chip in as we go, and I will give a Suez perspective on operating collections, MRFs, and reprocessing facilities as we go. So first up, Paul East. Paul, normally you're not on the other end of this. Normally you're interviewing me, so this is going to be a bit of a novelty. But Paul's the packaging sustainability manager at RECOUP, and he's going to focus on that front end. How is your plastic packaging collected, sorted, and reprocessed? So good morning, Paul. You're on mute. Paul, you're on mute. Still can't hear you. First technical glitch of the morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with us. Hang on, he's changing desks. Well,
we're just having a move around.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good thing I finished early, Paul, to give us some time for IT issues.
Yeah.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Hear me okay? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, I'm going to give a little background on RECOUP, work on design for recycling, and then move on to explain how following the guidelines will ensure that your plastic packaging will progress through the system. First, a bit of background to RECOUP's recyclability by design. First version in 2006, sponsored by RECOUP and Keyser. Information from the recycling industry is used to update tables which show recyclability of different aspects for each polymer. Information has been used by others, including translation into Spanish and organisations in South Africa. It's also been used for RECOUP members to use as part of their new product system. And that information, together with information that we work out for ourselves doing trials and testing, and also you've got case studies on there, so we write case studies which are I'll speak about a bit more later, but that's a good way of getting information out to the people who need to see it. So the main version on the left there is 80 pages odd. As I said, this is version 8, I think. Well respected, but we had 1 or 2 people saying 80 pages is a bit too much. And we had 1 or 2 others saying that it was a little bit too complicated in places. So we worked with the BPF to produce the one in the middle there, which is a summary version, which is about 20 pages. So the important stuff, including recyclability tables from the main document. The version on the right, we did with wrap and packed. That is a simple language version aimed at companies who probably don't have a packaging technologist or a packaging buyer, but they still have people who need to make decisions based on recyclability of packaging. So that's aimed at. This is a page from that design tips guide. And there's some of the examples of designs to avoid on here, including non-detectable black plastic and sleeves, which we'll mention a bit later, and multi-layer laminates. As I said, these are all covered in the blue guidelines book. I mentioned case studies. Work on case studies. This is the one we produced here. They are an effective method of getting the message across, showing good and less than good examples of recyclable or not recyclable plastic packaging. The latest of this is shown here, which we released last month, I think, which is for on-the-go packaging. So what is the recycling process? The recycling process can be split into various stages. Before I carry on, I should make an important point here. For your pack to be recycled, it has to pass through all of these stages. There is not one stage that's more important than another. It has to get through all of them. That is to meet the definition of recyclability, which most people agree on, the Ellen MacArthur version. First, it has to be collected, which in itself is more complicated than it should be. There's a very wide difference in the UK from one council to the next. For example, I live in Lincolnshire, where plastic pots, tubs and trays are collected. I work in Peterborough, 20 miles away, where they're not. And it's that sort of thing that I'm hoping that Adam's going to talk a bit more about that. So the first stage there is the consumer. This is as difficult as any other stage because of the conflicting messages we're asking for to contend with. To help RECOUP via our consumer-facing brand Pledge to Recycle, work with our members to pass on to the public information on recycling and the products that can be made into. Part of RECOUP's work is an annual UK household collection survey for anybody who likes statistics and figures. I leave this on here mainly just to point out that little graph on the left. That tells us that curbside collection of pots, tubs and trays began in 2007. So for anybody who says, and there are quite a few people, that recycling as an industry is not moving quick enough, it's worth remembering that we've come quite a fair way in such a short time. The next stage is sorting. Materials recycling facility is sorted. Well, it's difficult to describe one stage as more important than another, having already said it has to be recycled, it has to go through all of these stages. This is the first stage at which decisions that you make about your pack have an impact, and it will affect how the product goes through the system. So just looking at some of those machines here, you've got a couple of NIR machines, which I'll talk about in a bit, and a hand sorting line on the right. This diagram shows what's called an OCC screen, which basically is designed to sort material by shape. So large card and corrugated card will pass over the rotating discs, as will plastic trays. A bit right in the top left corner shows small objects, and they actually fall through. They're called fines. They fall through the holes in the screen at this point. RECOUP have a group looking at the issue of recycling of small items. There's a list there of some of the things that are included. It's one of the most difficult groups that we do because there is no obvious answer. At the minute, the way the systems are set up, anything less than about 40 or 50 mil will fall through, as we saw on the diagram earlier. So the regular size material that has fallen through the two decks will proceed to a new screen. The segregation process is similar to the OCC screen, with discs revolving in a way to allow newspapers and magazines to pass over. Okay, I won't label on that. This is a picture of an NIR, NIR near infrared sorting unit. Basically what happens is it shines infrared light onto the pack and reads what the material is by what it reflects back. So it detects a spectrum of different objects. Outputs from the NIR are generally in two streams: positive ejections and rejects. An NIR has the option to be fine-tuned to detect a wide variety of materials, going as far as to distinguish between different polymers and also colours. This is a issue again that you may have seen. Black plastic is not detectable by an NIR. It's because it contains a pigment called carbon black, which is widely used, widely available and quite cheap. So any packaging that contains even the tiniest amount of carbon black is difficult to detect or impossible to detect by an NIR. Again, there's a RECOUP group looking at it, and there are options for this. There are, unlike the previous one, more items, there are ways to deal with the problem. The most obvious one is don't use black at all, change to clear where you can, because not only does that guarantee it gets through the NIR sort, it also has a higher end value at the end of it all. This is a photo of a stripped down a sleeve, which requests that the sleeve is removed before placing the bottle in the recycling. Without meaning to suggest that anything is more than a recommendation, we have to ask how many people actually carry out this request before disposing of the bottle. From what we've seen, not too many. If the sleeve remains intact, there's a real possibility that the bottle might be incorrectly sorted and then go on to contaminate other waste streams. And you'll see the little comment that we've put in the top there, which I quoted from a certain someone: "You can't make packaging recyclable by passing the responsibility onto the consumer." Again, the consumer has enough to think about with all the messages we're giving them, so it's passing on further information to them is probably not the best thing to do. Other considerations on here, another issue is label coverage. As mentioned before, the sorting system needs to reflect light from the packs. So for that to happen, the pack should not be obscured. So guidelines currently recommend a pack coverage of less than 60% to enable the system to do its job and pick the plastic item out. Sorting systems will also tend to reject anything below a certain height. So, for example, a lightweight tray of less than 40 mil height might be incorrectly sorted and go with the plastic films. Use of PP or PE label instead of self-adhesive paper label avoids possible problems due to clogging with paper labels after they're removed in the recycling system. Recycling caps on bottles, the ideal is not always to use the same polymer, especially if the bottle is clear and the cap is not. The preferred solution is to manufacture the cap from a different polymer. Just to follow that up, the next stage in the process is reprocessing. Some will call this one stage, some will call it 2 or even 3 stages, because some factories are set up to do some of this and some are set up to do just certain parts of it. The first stage includes washing and chopping to manufacture flake. And there also, the float sink, I'll say something about the float sink test, which is the bit in the middle. When the flake is chopped up, the way that they separate, the way that the polymers are separated is in this float sink system. So anything that's oil-based will float, and PET and PVC does not float. That's also an illustration of why PVC is a problem. Again, you will have heard that PVC is an issue to the recycling process. That's why, basically, one reason why. It has the same specific gravity as PET, so it's very, very difficult to separate out. Another one, again, depending on what industry, and you might have heard of or heard us, people like us complaining about, is PE layers on the films. By films, I include some trays, multivacs, etc., that often have a PE sealing layer. Why not? Well, as you can see, it has a different melt point. It melts quicker. So as it's doing that, the PE will form these little black bits in the melt. And if there are ways to try and stop it, but if that goes through to make a bottle, then you can see the little black spots that turn up. And those black spots, if they can then turn into holes. So basically, it's just, again, an idea that we don't like. So that's why we class anything with a PE sealing layer as not recyclable. This is an industry that exists to make money, and the only way anything can be recycled, turned into something else, is for there to be an end product manufactured and sold. So even if something is technically recyclable, not only does it have to go through all the previous stages, but it has to be used for products like this. The encouraging thing is, I could have made up about 5 slides of products that are made from recycled plastic, because that part of it is increasing all the time. How am I doing for time, Adam?
Yeah, you're okay, mate. Carry on.
Okay, I've just got 2 or 3 more. So just to mention the pack testing that we currently offer as a benefit to members. We can continue to run sorting tests at MRFs as an assurance to both brand owners and packaging manufacturers that their pack will be correctly sorted. We take sample packaging and review them in a typical UK system. The procedure is for members to send us a handful of samples, and then we'll let you know what we're doing with them and produce a report at the end. Briefly mention Recyclass because Kate's going to talk about that in a bit. That's a certification system that we're involved with at the minute. And another one very similar, which is with OPRL, a new venture. This is to test packaging materials for OPRL members to prove recyclability. This is seen as complementary and puts us in a good condition to help deliver more recycling. Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, fascinating journey through material flow, through collections, processing and reprocessing. And I think it's really important that you made that key statement that, you know, something is only recycled when it's got an end market and it goes back into that market, because, you know, it's so easy to you know, wantonly collect stuff for no reason, or assume that it goes through the system, you know, and pass your responsibility. I often reflect on the 590s rule that we've been talking about for a little while now, which is 90% of the people recycle 90% of the time, and they are accurate 90% of the time. So 90, 90, 90, and it comes into my MRF, which is 90% accurate. And it goes to a reprocessor that does a pretty good job, but it's still only 90% accurate. And that means for all the material you put on the market, you can only recycle 59% of it, which means we fail to hit our targets. That's quite a sobering kind of, you know, point to reflect on, isn't it, Paul? That you need almost everybody getting it right on day one. So the point you made a couple of really good points, actually. One was about simplicity and not expecting the public to take responsibility. I like that. You mentioned about the size, because if it's a fine, it's going to drop through, it's gone. We can't recycle that. And, you know, the obvious thing around black being another example. They're all things that are in effect going to undermine the efficiency of a system, whether you like it or not, aren't they?
Yeah, and obviously our work is in producing guidelines and running tests for members is to try and well, 2 things. One, put the information out there about what you can do to alleviate all those things. I only touched on that page in the blue document. It's got 9. I think I only mentioned about 5 of those. So there's enough that we can do, or we can instruct you to do as a brand owner. And yeah, and then we'll work with the brands and packaging manufacturers to test them out.
And I think the I think the initiative with OPRL is a really positive one. I don't know how well the audience know OPRL, but having that recycled or not recyclable logo on the side of your packaging, I think is, as the public become more attuned to yes or no, and we start to focus on it's recyclable or not, and consistent collections are then all about the recyclable stuff as opposed to the not. I just think that's a great opportunity for your, the analysis that RECOUP can do around, packaging type and suitability for the system, and then getting the labeling right to make it easier for the public. That sounds to me that we're finally getting everybody pulling in the right direction.
We are where people use the OPRL label. I mean, one of the issues is that there's still too many other labels and logos around that tend to confuse people. I mean, if we mention what the green dot is, I'll have to spend half an hour telling people what it is, but yeah, there's too many other types of labels around. But yeah, we talk to OPRL often enough and usually agree.
Well, I'm sure we'll revisit labelling as the rest of this hour progresses. I've got one question here from the audience. Getting all this material being recyclable is all well and good, but we've only got 20% capacity here in the UK to deal with this material. Are we fighting the wrong battle when it comes to making stuff recyclable, or are we focusing on the wrong material? Should we be growing the UK marketplace? Where's the big step change going to come from?
I've always believed that the way you get things moving is all of the above, basically. You can't, as I explained earlier, everything has to go through all those stages. So somebody described it as having all your ducks in a row. And then basically, yeah, that's the way I think about it. You can't just concentrate on one area and try and improve it. It's got to be everything. So the thing that, in my mind anyway, makes the design for recycling sort of stand out a little bit is purely and simply it's the first stage. It's the point at which people make decisions that are then going to affect how that progresses through the recycling system right from the start. So other things are just as important, and work that we're doing with MRFs, work we're doing with councils, work that progressing to educate the consumer. It's all got to happen, but this is the first bit.
Yeah, and it's all part of that system aligning properly. And if any bit goes too fast or goes out of kilter, we end up with a massive problem. It's either a contaminant, or the system can't cope, or the consumer's expectation rises. So, it's a complex system that needs aligning. Couple more quick questions. Let's go for short answers. What's the current state of play for rigid PET recycling?
There are a few places that are dedicated. I think there's only one dedicated plant in the whole of Europe to take PET trays in, which is in Holland. But other places are recycling them. It is used in some cases it's mixed with PET from bottles and then used to make certain products that that's acceptable for. There's other places that are set up to recycle PET trays back into PET trays. So it is happening. It's slow and there's not that much of it, but the more we can help that by tidying it up and cleaning it up and making people not leave great big paper base labels on the bottom of their trays and things like that, then the more it will help.
And last one for you, mate. Bottle caps, should they be the same or different polymer? Should they be left on or off the bottle? And if they're and it is that size function you mentioned, an absolute cutoff. What's your advice on the bottle caps?
That's not one. That's about three. The bottle caps is follow your local authority advice, because different places have different rules. There are some places where they will take, they are able to deal with the bottle cap, as in it's all to do with whether they flake it first or they wash it first. But basically, some places they can deal with it and some they can't. So the hard and fast rule is, if in doubt, is leave it on, because that's what the rule should be, and that's the majority. But yeah, follow your local council rule is basically that one. And as for what material it is, you follow the guidelines. As I said, it's all to do with float sink and how it separates out. The exception to that, I think, is PE, where you've got milk bottles, which are PE, and you've got a cap, which is PE. So you normally want a different polymer, but with milk bottles, they recycle them together. So that's why the milk bottle tops were changed from sort of dark blue to a light blue and all that sort of stuff to try and recycle, make them more recyclable.
Very good. I mean, and as an operator of MRFs, I'd rather the lids were on than off, because that way they don't get lost in the fines fraction, and it suits me.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, and the fines thing. The fines thing is between 40 and 50 mil, and the reason I can't be more precise than that is very simple. Every MRF has different systems that interact with each other, so can't really be any more precise.
And I think that's a really important message, Paul, is that every MRF is different, because I've got MRFs that were built 20 years ago and have been updated and retrofitted. I've got MRFs that have been open a year. They've got different kit in different configurations. They all do something slightly different. And I always say that, you know, a MRF is designed for a feedstock that we're predicting. And the feedstock in the northeast of England built in 2019 is different from the feedstock in the southwest of England built in 1997. And I think, you know, we can't have a single generic MRF that does the same thing exactly the same way in every location, because the feedstock is not that consistent, even if we had consistent collection. So that nuancing of where's our material come from, how much of it is commercial versus householder, is quite important, as you start to realize that you get more film, or you get more bottle tops, or you get more PET, or you get more cardboard, which creates another problem in how do you get it off the MRF belt. Just one aside before we move on. I often get asked this question about what's the optimal speed of a MRF. And I'm like, well, if you give me the perfect feedstock, it can go really, really quick. But, you know, the speed of my MRF, my belts are going anywhere from about 12 meters a second to 20 meters a second in terms of belt speed. And people are going, whoa, hang on, that's madness. Well, it is. But, you know, when you're hand sorting and you're used to picking out the contaminants or the target material, actually, you can do that, and so can AI as well. But what I would argue is you've got to also think about the depth of the conveyor belt. And so we talk about sort of a volume flow as being the key measure when you're looking at, can I get your material off? And if I've got, you know, cardboard sitting on top of plastics mixed in with other things, or I've got a semi-compacted load, which means materials are stuck together, you've got to slow that belt down, because you just cannot, you know, you cannot get the material off in the way that the system's designed. If it was flowing through single material depth, you know, well spaced out, you know, you could automate that quite easily. You could have a little bit of quality sort with hand pickers, and you know, it's an effective system. But again, these sites were designed with a feedstock in mind. They were designed with an end market price in mind. There's an operational cost in mind. So you can't just go, let's slow it down because we need to pull out some of this material, because ultimately the whole of the economics of the system start to crash. So again, the complexity of what it was designed for and how it operates, you know, this is why I would challenge our next speaker to think about, what is it you're doing with the redesign of your packaging? Does it fit the system that we've got now and the system we might have in the future? So Paul, I'm going to come back to you for some more questions at the end. So thank you, Paul. Right. Okay. There's my segue to Jo Padwick, Business Transformation Manager at Suntory Beverage and Food, Great Britain and Ireland. And she's going to tell us all about what was my favorite juice drink as a child, the new Ribena bottle. Hello, Jo, how are you?
Morning, how are you? You right?
I'm very well. The floor is yours. Tell us about the journey.
Perfect. Well, if you can move me on to my first slide. I'm Jo Padwick. I work for Suntory Beverage and Food. We're one of the UK's leading soft drinks manufacturers. We've got Ribena and of course Lucozade in our portfolio. And for us, you know, growing for good is very much at the heart of our vision. So as we grow as a company, we want to be making sure we're giving back to society, and that we're, making a positive impact on the planet and people. And I guess packaging plays an absolute key role in this. We want to make sure our packaging is 100% sustainable, that we're getting rid of any problematic packaging, and we're also making sure that we're designing our packaging to drive that circularity. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to share the journey that we've been on with Ribena, and share how we've been liaising with the industry to make sure that, as Adam challenges on, that we've designed something that is fit for purpose. So if you can move to my next slide, please. Oh, it's coming. Here we go. So what we did as a company is that we made sure that we reviewed all of our packaging, basically, and RECOUP actually facilitated us getting out into one of the MRFs to actually see what happens with our recycling. And what we realised is that with our full sleeves that cover our ready-to-drink bottles, a lot of them were ending up in that left-hand picture, the coloured plastic, because they couldn't, you know, the detectors couldn't see through that full sleeve to know that there was a clear bottle underneath. And so, you know, we absolutely believe in driving circularity, because Ribena has been using 100% recycled plastic for over 13 years. And so we wanted to make sure that you know, our packaging was optimized, that we were driving circularity. So we've committed to reducing the sleeves, and Ribena was the first brand to make that move. So if you move to my next slide. And so I guess the journey that we went on is we worked with our design agency, Seymour Powell, to bring consumers on that journey with us. So lots and lots of research, which was quite challenging during last year in COVID environment. But we wanted to modernize the brand, but also make it the Ribena that they love. And I'll come on in a little bit to show how we use the bottle as well to drive sustainability messaging. Again, RECOUP unlocked a trial for us down at a Viridor plant in Ford, and we were able to throw a load of bottles down their lines with different sleeve heights, and that enabled us to understand what was the optimum. And we've also been out talking to partners like Biffa and Viridor and other MRFs and PAFs to understand, you know, what was actually going to be fit for purpose for the existing recycling infrastructure. And I guess finally, a key thing is whatever bottle we designed, whatever label we were using, we needed to make sure it would run down our manufacturing lines efficiently. A big investment for us. We had to completely replace all our labeling for Ribena. So it was over 1.2 million investment for us. Hole in the wall of the factory to get the old out and the new in. So a big kind of achievement. And I think also Kate will come on to talk about it after me, but we're the first brand to get an A rating on the new Recyclass accreditation as well. So really proud of what we've managed to achieve. If you can go on to my next slide, please. So this is blatantly kind of the from and the to, and I would say the reaction from the industry has been really, really positive, from both, you know, bodies like RECOUP and Stuart here with a lovely quote, other recycling bodies, the government, NGOs, and of course, you know, consumers. They're just starting to find out about the new bottle because we launched it in November, but I think it's going down really, really well, and we're super proud of it. So just the next slide, just talking of some of those design features. So Ribena, as I say, been made from 100% recycled plastic for 13 years, and we wanted to use the bottle and the label to drive home some of these environmental messaging. So as you can see, we've embossed "Recycle Me" around the neck, and then we've also used an emboss on the main body of the bottle to drive home the 100% recycled message too. And then we've also used the label as well to kind of encourage recycling and educate. And of course, you've got the OPRL label on there. We had lots of conversations with RECOUP around sort of material and that floatability, making sure it was made from a low density material. So we've ended up with a PP roll fed label, but we were discussing mixtures of PP, PE. We had conversations around modified PET. So we've ended up with a 77% size reduction, and also it equates to a 200-ton saving in plastic usage as well. But really kind of we worked hard to use both label and bottle to drive home these kind of sustainability messaging. You go to my next slide, please. And so we're out there talking to consumers and telling them all about the new bottle, because of course, you know, it's a big change and we need to make sure that they can find it easily when they go into store or to the chillers. So a big kind of 1.5 million put behind TV, a video on demand, social campaign. But I guess those pictures on the right as well are key when you actually get near to buying the bottle, explaining why we've made the change and also what it looks like, and some of the narrative there that we're educating around sort of that circularity piece. So in language that they'll understand, you know, we've given bottles a new lease of life as bottles. So as I say, we launched in November, probably flowed into market. So hopefully as lockdown eases and people start to actually get back out and shop, they'll hopefully get to grips with the new look and feel of the bottle. And if you just go to the next slide, please. And so yeah, so a little bit of a pun here, but I guess Ribena's, you know, leaned into this, rolled up its sleeves. It's the largest selling UK drinks brand now, with bottles that are made from both 100% recycled PET and, of course, now, hand on heart, we can now say it's bottle to bottle recyclable, because, you know, PET for us is valuable. We want that PET back. We want to be reinvesting it into our brands, and so we're really proud to have made this move, this positive change for the better. And for my final slide. Just move me on. Oh, perfect. Ribena's the first out the door, but Lucozade is going to be right behind it. So these designs are in market now. You might have started to see them come through. These have actually still full sleeves, but they've got 60% transparent areas on them. So again, an interim measure to try to get them into the clear PET. But as I say, it's an interim measure because later this year we'll be moving to a reduced sleeve on Lucozade Sport, followed by Energy. It's big, complex changes for us. It's changing labelling machines on 6 of our 7 manufacturing lines in our factory. Big investment, millions of pounds. So, you know, I think as a company, we're really proud that our packaging is going to be 100% recyclable, but bottle to bottle recyclable, so that we're not causing any issues, and we're actually going to be part of the solution in driving that circularity. Thank you.
Fantastic, Jo. It's a great story, huge journey you've gone on, massive investment, but I think it was well worth it. And I mean, you're ahead of the game now and leading the pack, which is fantastic too. Tell me, we've had a question about is your 100% recycled PET claim actually true? I'll take your word for it, but you know, somebody wants to know.
Yes, so the bottle is made from 100% recycled plastic. Obviously, you can't source recycled content for caps yet. Maybe labels in the next few years, because we're starting to talk to suppliers about that. But the bottle is made from 100% recycled plastic. I mean, out of interest, you know, we actually source our recycled PET from the Netherlands. They source it from deposit return schemes from Germany and the Netherlands. So, you know, I think it's going to be an interesting development in the UK when deposit return schemes get rolled out, because we're looking forward to unlocking more food grade PET that we can kind of invest.
Thank you. And is any of that material got a chemical recycling theme to it, or is it
no, it's all mechanical. It's all mechanical recycled at the moment. I think chemical, you know, we're looking into it. We're part of a consortium that actually uses enzymes to break down bacteria. But I think most of these technologies are at the early days of development, and also we need regulatory buy-in that they are going to approve that it will be, you know, deemed as recycled content. So, but we're certainly, I think it's, you know, chemical is one to look at, because you're always going to need a little bit of virgin in the mix to make sure that you've got good quality.
Yes, and I think I'm going to pick up chemical recycling briefly, because there was a question asked about films and flexibles, and there's a report that Suez issued 2 weeks ago, which I think should be widely available on the internet. I can put a link in the chat later if needs be, but we looked at the state of those types of collection systems, which are not very existent. You know, a few authorities are collecting elements of that, but aren't really recycling it. But when you look at the plants that are available in Europe and the capacity that's due to come online, there's a huge amount of scope, we think, and we were working with the likes of Nestle and Mars and others to look at this. So it wasn't just us in isolation. You know, when the new policy reforms come under EPR and DRS, there could be, you know, sufficient capacity in existing collection systems to make this a new material stream. So if we can, you know, look at some of those technologies that are kind of just on the horizon, and chemical recycling is one of those. You know, for certain material streams, that could well be an important part of the system with sleeves in mind, as well as films and flexibles. So yeah, there's some real opportunity there, I think, Jo. Final quick question for you then, Jo. One's about payback, and I don't give me the pounds and pence or even the months or years, but is this about competitive advantage, or is this about, you know, positioning yourself with EPR reforms coming and you getting, you know, a better you know, unit tax on the bottles you sell? Well, how do you see the payback working?
Well, I just think it's part of the company ethos. We wanted to be making sure that we're doing the right thing. And so, you know, we've signed up to the UK Plastics Pact. We've agreed that all of our packaging will be 100% recyclable, which technically, our full sleeve, you know, you could argue that our bottles are recyclable, but we wanted to be part of the solution of driving bottle to bottle recyclability and drive that circularity. So this is why we're leaning into this, because, you know, as I say, we want that plastic back, we want to reuse it. So that's why we're making these design changes.
Thank you. And last question, because it's a good one, because you mentioned DRS. So once DRS is in place, you know, a couple of years from now in the UK, let's say, what happens to the quality of your PET? Because in theory, it's going to go round and round, but it is going to deteriorate. I mean, is that something you're thinking about or planning for?
Yeah, so we've actually made an ambition that by 2030, all of our plastic will be 100% sustainable. But for us, that's using a mixture of both mechanical and chemical recycling, and also plant-based PET. I'm not sure if you're aware, but over in Sweden, the government has stepped in to stop brands using 100% rPET because they're worried about that quality piece. And I think you're always going to need a little bit of virgin in the mix. So that's why I think, you know, that's important that, you know, we keep an eye on that as brands lean into our rPET commitments, and make sure, yeah, we keep that quality, that we can reuse bottles, because that's, you know, that's going to be key.
Thank you. Excellent. So many more questions coming in, but I'm conscious of time. Let's use your A-star branding under RECOUP as a link into Kate Bedford, Senior Projects Officer at RECOUP, looking at RECOUP. Tell us all about it, Kate. Your floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Adam. So for those of you that are not familiar, I just wanted to give you an overview of how the RECOUP process works. So next slide, please. So in 2020, RECOUP became official accredited auditors for RECOUP in the UK. This means that we can evaluate design for recycling of plastic packaging with a goal of improving the recyclability. The methodology is based on the design for recycling guidelines and evaluation protocols developed by RECOUP. This relies on quantitative verification of recyclability of packaging, which uses a formula developed by RECOUP, which meets European standards. To achieve certification, the plastic packaging is evaluated against existing recycling streams, ranked for the grade of recyclability, and is shown to provide compatibility to recycling guidelines. So how does the assessment work? The pack being assessed must be the finished product, as would be marketed and sold in the UK. So it must be complete with all closures, labels, adhesives, etc. Parts of packaging, for example, top films, labels, closures or valves, would not apply as they cannot be assessed individually. So in practice, it must be a shelf-ready pack that we know has an existing collection and sorting stream within the UK. The guidelines are used as a tool to grade the pack from A to F, with A being recyclable and F being not recyclable. As the pack is evaluated, it can be downgraded, dropping a class depending on its compatibility and issues that could affect the quality of the final product and overall the final rating. So this slide highlights how the guidelines are transposed into the scoring. So if we have a look at the slide here, this particular slide is looking at a barrier property. So if the pack contains a barrier property, in the example here being EVOH, so if we have a look at the amber column and the barrier is less than 5%, it is still compatible but would drop the score by 1 class, giving the overall rating a B. If the barrier is over 5%, it is shown here in the red column, and this will then drop the score by 3 classes, giving the pack a D rating. Next slide. So to start the process with us, the applicant must complete the online assessment on the RECOUP website. This tool is available for anyone to use and gives a good indication of how the pack would behave and how it can be improved. Once complete and a circular rating is achieved, the applicant can then contact us at RECOUP to complete the audit. Next slide. So once the audit is complete and the pack passes the assessment, a certificate verified by Recyclas is produced. The certificate is recognised across industry and is valid for 3 years and is based on the country that the pack is tested and sold in. In addition to this, you are permitted to use the Recyclas logo and rating to promote the audited pack. So where we represent the UK, there are other auditors across Europe representing each country. So being part of this scheme allows us to continue to develop our findings, keeping guidelines up to date, and it will continue to change as new technology develops. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Very, very useful. And I've used Recyclas, albeit I've used it in continental Europe as part of the Suez portfolio. I mean, I think linking back to Paul, this is an important part of this transition, isn't it? Kate, as we move forward as a sector, collaboratively with brands and reprocessors, you know, end markets, etc., we need to have that consistency of understanding and appreciation, don't we? And this is, you know, this is a classic part of that new jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah, and it's, you know, and yes. Go on. Sorry.
What kind of take up are we getting? I mean, how busy are you?
Lots of interest, lots and lots of interest. We have had, you know, initially we had lots of inquiries about film. I mean, at the moment, film is not part of the Recyclas process, but that's, you know, likely to change. Just because at the moment, I think there's only 17% of local authorities in the UK collecting it. So Recyclas don't class that as a, you know, established collection and sorting stream at the moment, but that's likely to change. Yep. But yeah, we get lots and lots of inquiries for all different types of packaging.
Good. And you're open to emails and phone calls from anybody on the line currently who's thinking about their
if anybody
packaging
wants to get in touch with us, it's if they drop us an email at recyclas@recoup.org and we can take it from there.
Fabulous. Thank you. Right, I'm going to bring all the speakers up. Let's get 5 minutes of banter before I have to wrap up. I've got a question here. I've answered a few of the questions online, by the way, so hopefully you know, I've not offended anybody by not asking your question. But digital watermarking. I'm going to go to Paul and then Jo on this one. You know, Holy Grail's had a lot of airtime in the last 2 years. You know, the idea that digital watermarks are going to make the sorting of our streams much easier. Have you got a strong opinion on that, Paul? Shout. Hang on, he's going to wander around the office again. Jo, what's your thoughts on digital watermarking?
Yeah, we did look at this back in the days, the very beginning of, you know, deciding what we were going to do. I think it relied on a lot of kind of investment from the maths, and so, you know, who would coordinate that, who would lead that. And back to your earlier point, I think we were just trying to make it easy for consumers. So it just made sense to, you know, to redesign the packaging and make it easy for consumers to recycle it.
And Paul, thank you.
There is a process on the way, a project looking at producing food grade recycled PP. The reason that doesn't currently exist is because the PP is used for other things as well as food. So the decision is you can't make a food grade from it. Digital watermarking is one way of getting around that problem. So yeah, we're working with, or part of a large team that Nextech have got together and looking at that as a possibility. So yes, it has a role to play.
Good. And I think from a Suez perspective, we've been involved in a number of early research projects looking at digital watermarking and equivalents, all sorts of labels, whether they be visible or not. And there is definitely a role for one of these to come to the fore. I wouldn't want to pick the horse, but we definitely need one to become the norm. And I think, you know, you mentioned it earlier, Paul, there's too many labels. What we don't need is a load of other labels, all meaning different things through, you know, artificial intelligence somewhere in our system. We need an approach that can work for all of our packaging types and then we can retrofit MRFs or build new infrastructure accordingly. You know, one size must fit all, I would suggest. Question, how are we dealing with plastic films, the wraparounds on the PET bottles, Joe? What's where are they going at the moment, and what's the plans?
Well, Paul might be able to support me on this, but obviously I think using a low density material is key in order to be able to separate them easily from the bottle. I think it's a mixed viewpoint as to whether they can get, you know, downcycled into something else, whether they get sent for burning for energy, or whether they get sent to landfill. I think it's a real mixed piece. I don't know, Paul, if you want to support that.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with film in general, as mentioned a few times, is they're not collected enough. So getting the rest of the recycling industry to work on, if that's the right phrase, to work on films, it's difficult to do when they're not getting enough coming through. Yep. There's two schools of thought as to how you tackle that. One is let's get it all collected and then let the recycling industry worry about it, which seems a bit lopsided view, because you're putting all the pressure then onto the recycling industry to do something with it, or try and have some sort of halfway stage that people are looking at bring back schemes and that currently exist for PE, and enlarging that to other types of film. But film is recyclable. It is an issue of collection and sorting to get to the next stage, and if it, you know, so good way of putting it, post-industrial film is recycled. Yes. So the stuff where you've already got a lot of it in one place that it's worth collecting is recycled. It's
scale and logistics as always, isn't it, with many of these niche materials. What's a quick question for you, Joe, about direct object printing to replace labels? Is that an area you've looked at or thinking about?
Yeah, we did look at it. I think the companies we spoke to were sort of, you know, it would only be a test and learn at the moment. They can't keep up with the speed of our lines. They certainly can't print a lot on the bottle. So I think it's one that we'll keep close to for future development. But at the moment, it wasn't a viable solution. Thank
you. And Paul, final question for you. Refillable bottles, surely life cycle assessments have proven more than once that refillable glass bottles are the answer. Why are you people talking about plastic?
Well, you give that one to me. That should be for everyone. On the hierarchy, reuse is above recycling, but we're just providing there's enough room there for both. I think not everybody's going to want to take a reusable bottle around with them maybe all the time, so there's room for both.
It's a fair point. So what's your takeaway message for me, Joe? What would you like the punters to go away and do next?
Well, just look out for our new designs. You know, hopefully we've redesigned that they'll flow through recycler systems and not cause any issues. But do reach out if there's any other concerns, because we're committed to make sure that we're driving that circularity, because we want the bottles back.
Fabulous. Kate, your takeaway message is probably something like get in touch, but have you got a takeaway message for us?
No, you're right, get in touch.
Cool. I think there's plenty of scope with that tool. And Paul, your takeaway message, apart from there's lots of rules that everybody should be applying, what's your big takeaway?
There's lots of rules that everybody should be applying, would be pretty well accurate. Another takeaway message is I need to find out what's wrong with my microphone on my laptop, because obviously but we got through it, so that's what counts. Sorry, the only other message, if you're a RECOUP member and you want PAX testing, then talk to us, because that's what we do. And if you're not a RECOUP member,
you should
why not get in touch with us and ask for some information.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Panelists, you've been awesome. Thank you, even with the IT issues. Audience, some great questions. Apologies we didn't answer them all, but we did promise we'd circulate them afterwards and get some answers. There's one or two specific ones there, including one for me about how would I deal with a specific waste stream, so I will pick it up later. We've heard about good design. We've heard about avoiding black. We've heard about certain size principles. We've heard about keep it simple. We've heard about don't let the public be the bottleneck almost in terms of this. We've heard about innovation in design to make it easy. We've heard about tools to make your life easier. The policy reform is heading in one direction. Simplicity is good, recycling is good, refillables is good. So if you're not in that space now, you need to be. So that's my takeaway message. If you're not in that space, you need to be. And RECOUP is a great way to get up to speed on all the things that are important for your packaging types. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been Dr. Adam Reed of Suez and CIWM, and I hope you have a really good day and see you at a future webinar perhaps. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.